guys. We're once again resuming this legendary series that I am constantly surprised so few of you have seen. I mean, a lot of you have seen it, but a surprising amount of you haven't, and I feel an obligation to expose this series to everyone who has not seen it yet, because if you're progressive online, especially in the age of politics and nonsense we're in today, you need to watch this. This series was made, for a short recap, this is the alt-right playbook series made by Innuendo Studios. It was produced primarily, mostly, back during Gamergate 1 and in the aftermath of it, and at that time, right-wing sympathy and right-wing politics, MAGA-ism, was at the time, its peak. And it was a very similar, hopeless feeling age of nonsense weirdos winning over, like, reasonability and logic, right? And these videos came about as a very satisfying, very nitty-gritty breakdown of the phenomenon happening in the political and social space, particularly with the right dominating the cultural trends at that time, and how they were taking over through Gamergate and that sort of anti-SJW era. Nowadays, though, things have gotten so much worse. Trump is back in office and more powerful than ever, and this series is 8 years old, at least the early parts of it are. And many people haven't seen it. The algorithm not really promoting it as much because it's old content. And so now, I feel a responsibility to introduce some of you baby lefties who might have been a chud as recently as a year ago to this classic series that I think does a great job of helping to explain how conservatives argue and how they think. Now, this is an episode I haven't seen in a while. I actually don't remember what this one is about. I mean, I know the gist, but I don't remember what its main point is. This is the next episode in the series that we have yet to watch, and that is You Go High, We Go Low. Let's see what it's all about. And let's see how much it relates to today's state of culture war, political nonsense.
I kiss him, I'll be kissing you. So I'll kiss him.
Violence, racism, and Nazis being Nazis. Content warning, folks. I hope I don't get copywritten for that
Say,
music.
for the sake of argument, you're a Democratic president finishing out your last year in office. There's not a lot you're expected
Obama?
to do as a lame duck, except endorse a Democrat for the upcoming election. But then, early in the year, something unexpected happens. A Supreme Court justice dies suddenly in his sleep. Vacancies in the Supreme Court are infrequent, as it's a lifetime appointment, so death and the occasional resignation are the only causes of an empty seat. And when it happens, it's the president's job to get the seat filled. So you set about the task of picking a successor, probably the last major decision you will make
Ruth Bader Ginsburg was alive when this video was made, by the way.
as president, when the Republican Senate tells you, yeah, we're not going to confirm anyone you nominate. And you say, well, if you think you've got the votes, you can reject my nominee and I'll pick someone else. And they say, oh no, we're not going to vote against your nominee. We're not going to hold a vote. What are you talking about? I haven't even nominated someone yet. We're not going to convene a vote on anyone you nominate. But that's your job. I make a nomination, the Senate holds a vote, and democracy decides who sits on the bench. Well, that's not what we're going to do. You're a lame duck. The next president will decide who sits on the Supreme Court. That's not how this works. That's not how we've ever done things. Certainly not when your party's had a lame duck in office. Well, it's what we're going to do. And you say, that's not what the Constitution says. And they say, the Constitution does not explicitly say we can't.
Damn, I didn't know whether or not this episode would be relevant to today's politics, but it's actually the most relevant episode of the alt-right playbook we could have possibly watched this stream. That is kind of fucking crazy how that lined up. That is kind of insane how perfectly that lined up. And yeah, that's what they're doing right now. Literally right now they're doing this in regards to getting Trump in office for an unconstitutional third term.
Your wife has a saying.
And I think conveniently, by the way, I think it's really worth pointing out, so much of the reputation leftists on the internet have for Democrats being these, like, ineffective friends to fascists or whatever mostly comes from the fact that they don't see enough campaign promises fulfilled by Democratic presidents. Meanwhile, these Democratic presidents are constantly, Obama and Biden in particular, constantly trying to do revolutionary policy change that would lead, 5-10 years in the future to a very much better quality of life in America. And yet, Republicans will literally just say, oh, you want to appoint a Democrat Supreme Court justice? We're just not going to convene a Senate vote. We're just not going to gather, so you can't hold the vote. And we're going to delay it until hopefully a Republican takes office and appoints who they want, which is what happened. And meanwhile, Obama gets shit from leftists to this day for not appointing a Supreme Court justice, as if it was his fault, as if he didn't try hard enough. The only way he could have gotten a Supreme Court justice in place is if he unconstitutionally, and I mean really unconstitutionally, went past the Senate and just appointed a Supreme Court justice. Like it would have been political suicide for the whole Democratic Party. It would have been a move towards, ironically, towards, I guess you could argue, fascism way before Trump came along. But nowadays, to this day, Obama still gets shit for not being able to get a Supreme Court justice verified. He had no power to make it happen. The Republicans are exclusively the ones that made that not happen, and the Dems get blamed. And there's always this imagined, like, well, the Dems could have done something. It's like, what could the Dems have done? Like actually, what could have Obama done in order to appoint a Supreme Court justice anyway? Nothing. He could have done nothing. The House Republicans did something similar to make Senate Democrats pass their budget. They do this there's so much shit like this, but it's too complicated and requires too much reading and like caring about somewhat boring, dry bullshit politics stuff for the average person, even on the left, to read it and care about it. So it's easy just to jump on the liberals are bad or whatever bandwagon. I still get comments from people saying, when did Zan become such a liberal? It's so pathetic. Like, I got a comment like that just the other night, and I was like, damn. Like, leftists still hate liberals more than fascists. They'll be getting, like, carted off to the camps by Trump, and they'll still say, Biden wasn't much better. Damn Democrats didn't stop this, Meanwhile, like all the Dems are also getting carted off to the death camps. It's like, yeah, it just feels like that sometimes.
Certainly not when your party's had a lame duck in office. Well, it's what we're going to do. And you say, that's not what the Constitution says. And they say, the Constitution does not explicitly say we can't. Your wife has a saying for when Republicans act up. They go low, we go high. So in considering your current predicament, you try to think of what taking the high road might look like. The Republicans have always accused you of being...
I'm more curious what taking the low road even looks like.
Too far left, so after some deliberation, you select a middle-of-the-road, utterly uncontroversial judge, the kind of candidate a functioning Senate should have no trouble confirming. You make a display of embracing the spirit of compromise, in the hopes they'll change their tune, or at the very least be shamed into convening a vote rather than admitting this had nothing to do with the timing or the nominee. And
this isn't... Something I do think is a little wrong here is that Obama... or the president doesn't just do stuff like this to try and win over people in Washington. A lot of it is actually trying to put people in Washington between a rock and a hard place. He knows as well as any politician, probably better than any politician, the president does, how much all of these different House representatives, Senate members, etc., they all want to get reelected. They all want to hold their seats. And so when Obama brings about a pretty agreeable for most, like even generally middle of the road or Republican voters, Supreme Court pick, who's, not going to stir the pot too much. He's going to be a pretty reasonable, person. The onus is on the Senate, particularly Republicans in the Senate. If they don't approve that nominee, and a lot of Americans like that nominee and didn't have a problem with it, it's kind of a bad look for them, especially if their voters are the ones who are mad about that decision. And so I think Obama's hope was that by compromising a bit, this would lead to Republican voters putting pressure on Republican senators to actually approve his Supreme Court pick. If they're not going to approve anyone unless it's a compromise, maybe, then might as well go with the compromise than only just the next Republican president picking what our next Supreme Court justice is, right? Like, anything mitigating as much harm as can be mitigated is better than no harm mitigation. But you'll notice even in this video, it's framed as like the weak Democrat liberal cucks themselves to the Republican and compromises. And it's like, politics is a little more complicated than that. Republicans play by a completely different rule set than we get to.
And was just about refusing to collaborate with a liberal. In response, the Republicans announced that not only will they still not convene a vote, some say that should a Democrat win the election, and they don't even know who the candidate is yet, they will hold the seat vacant for however long it takes to get a Republican in the White House. You didn't call their bluff. They are all too happy to admit that this is absolutely about dicking over liberals and guaranteeing as many conservatives as possible in the Supreme Court.
They succeeded. Overwhelmingly.
There is no official policy for what to do if one party simply refuses to do its job. But there is a legal argument that if the Senate refuses to vote on your nominee, they are, in effect, giving you permission to appoint a judge without their approval. Link in the down there part. This is technically a little extra constitutional, but it is the law in many similar scenarios.
If Trump tried to do this, no one would say it was constitutional. It is pretty. I will say, no leftists, including Innuendo Studios, would say this was constitutional at all if Trump tried to do exactly this. You're not wrong, DeLancer. The angry leftists wanted Obama and Biden to go full dictatorship, and it's like, no, I think that's bad. But then, if you say that's bad, they'll call you like an ineffective liberal and say, nah, we got to go as low as they do. And it's like, okay, but not in that way. Not by literally destroying democracy first. Like, no, I destroyed it first. I destroyed the sandcastle before you could, Republican Party. We're trying to protect the sandcastle. That's the end goal here, I thought.
And certainly if they're going to break the rules, you're within your rights to bend them. But they go low, we go high. How can you criticize them for going outside the Constitution if you're going to do it yourself? So, being the grown-up, you grit your teeth and do nothing. Seemingly there's nothing to do but publicly shame them, keeping a running tally of how many days your nomination has sat on senators' desks without a vote. You can play this as keeping your integrity, the Democrats seizing the moral high ground. But
I will say, more than 8 years later now, Obama's looked back on it pretty positively by most of America, especially for a Democrat. I mean, to be clear, Biden was on a policy level the most progressive, pro-union, pro-worker, pro-LGBT, POC president we've ever had. Best on environmental issues, the best on the economy. I know that the economy suffering from COVID makes it hard to really see that, but it's pretty undeniable now when you look at his policy setup, the effects that his policies had on the economy throughout his presidency until he left office. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, he took us out of the toilet and made us the most successful recovery that of any country post-COVID. Every other country was worse off after COVID than America was because of Biden's plan and the way that Biden executed it. And Trump tried at every turn to take credit once the economy started to bounce back. We're a year out from the election and Trump is tweeting, the economy is only so good because people know I'm going to win and they're just excited and buying stocks because they're so anticipating how good the economy will be under my presidency. Meanwhile, it's a year and a half till the election and it's just Biden and he's still trying to take credit. And now the economy has crashed under him, and he's trying to blame it on Biden. So that's where we're at now. I just think it's worth pointing out, as much as 8 years ago it was easy to call Obama weak for doing nothing there and not subverting the Constitution, looking back at it, Obama is remembered as pretty fondly. There's some rose-tinted goggles America has for Obama compared to Biden or even first-term Trump. Remember, Obama pulled numbers and like percentages in states that were insane. Like Obama turned red states purple and many red states straight up blue. He turned pretty much every purple state blue, but he turned a lot of red states purple and a fair amount of red states blue. Like, it's actually crazy how popular Obama was.
But in response, the Republicans seize the Supreme Court. Their guy wins the election, you finish out your term, and Republicans will put one of their own on the bench. And just before you leave office,
But now, though, and here's why that matters, if Trump runs for a third term, the Democrats have to run Obama for a third term. At that point, it's going to be Trump versus Obama. If Trump really is running for a third term, I'm pretty certain Obama's going to run for a third one too. That's what we need. We need Trump v. Obama. Like, keep that in mind. That is what we're all looking forward to. That is the silver lining to this entire situation, is that Trump v. Obama is possible now. Like, that could happen. And that's going to be the battle of the century, okay? That's going to be Aang v. Ozai levels of epic, okay? Like, I'm ready for this shit. It's the final showdown.
the new guy is inaugurated, and your nomination expires after 293 days without a vote, nearly 3 times the previous record, a Republican senator predicts that, under the new administration, the Democrats, the minority party in the House, Senate, and now Supreme Court, will be the biggest obstructionists history has ever seen. Think of the position this puts Democratic senators into. They have been preemptively denigrated for the exact behaviors Republicans have relied on for the last 8 years. After
It's a very effective strategy the Republicans engage in. Do the thing that's bad, but before you even start doing it, start repeatedly accusing the Democrats of doing that thing with no evidence. Once you start doing it and the Democrats or anyone on the Democrat side start obviously calling it out, it looks really bad. It's really hard to make anyone believe you if you accuse someone of something when that person has already accused you of the same thing. So if they preempt these accusations and then you're like, wait, no, they actually are doing that, you look weak and like you have no retort, no response, because like people aren't expecting you to levy an allegation. They're expecting you to debunk an allegation, if anything. You know, so it's very hard to fight against what the Republicans are doing when you have to fight against the claims they're making about you. And it's all the much harder when what you need to do is say, no, we're not doing that. They actually are, and lied to you preemptively so you wouldn't pay attention. And that's a hard sell to get people to understand. It's hard to get people to understand just how convoluted and insane and planned out the Republican strategy is. A lot of them just think, what do you mean? I'm just a noticer. They don't realize they're just part of they're just one cog in the machine of the right-wing propaganda environment.
In terms of misuse, every means of obstructing an unfit executive branch, from filibustering bills to shutting down the government rather than approve a budget proposal, has just been defined as going low. Worse, in the event of a Supreme Court appointment being literally stolen by the opposing party, it might be defensible to not convene a vote on whomever that party nominates, except that's exactly the tactic Democrats have spent 10 months condemning. If everything that might restore democratic norms is tainted by the Republicans who violated those norms in the first place, then the only honorable move left is compliance. Give Republicans whatever they want, confirm their judge as quickly and smoothly as possible, treat the situation like it's fair, because that's what they should have done when it actually was. This is, somehow, going high. And that comment from the Republican senator belies the truth. They know what they're doing, and they're not ashamed. They know Democrats aren't obstructionists. They're counting on it. When one party can be relied on to do the exact opposite of your worst behavior, good strategy is to do to them as destructively as possible whatever you don't want them to do to you. The new Republican norm is you go high, we go low. Now, this is a long-standing Republican thing, and we'll talk about how the alt-right comes into it by and by. And though it's effective, it's not sophisticated. I mean, I just got finished with my intro and I'm already out of things to say about it. So let's turn the...
I am actually shocked at how applicable this video has ended up being to today's stream and the topics we've covered. How much we've been talking today about how, like, Trump and MAGA are all about pushing the line and doing the bad thing, knowing that you have to, like, your side is fighting for the principle of integrity. They're fighting against the principle of integrity fundamentally. And so when one side is against the concept of integrity, their lack of integrity gives them an advantage to lie and cheat in order to win over people's minds. But if you're fighting for the side that's in favor of integrity as a fundamental basis of your position, you are sort of precluded, especially when you're known to be the side of integrity, you're precluded from dropping said integrity in order to gain some form of strategic advantage politically. This means basically Democrats are known to be the people who keep by the rules. They don't do things that are wrong. The Republicans try to accuse them of it, but the best way they can counter the Republicans' accusations is just to be the living opposite of what the Republicans call them. But the Republicans want them. The Republicans want the Democrats to continue playing by the rule book because it opens them up to just do whatever the fuck they want. And they've been repeating this for years now, like way before this video was made and since it came out, and it's continued to work. And less Americans by the day seem to have the capacity to recognize it.
The camera around and ask not why the technique is popular, but why Democrats keep falling for it. On the face of it, it would appear Democrats are a lot more concerned with being called hypocrites than Republicans are, which would seem a very solvable problem. Republicans are going to yell so much for the tolerant left, no matter what form our opposition takes, so ignore them. But clearly it's not that simple, or we wouldn't be having this problem. Republicans are striking at something more fundamental to American liberalism that makes these charges of hypocrisy hard to ignore. So, what's wrong with liberals? The modern American Democrat is in an unenviable position. You need two things to win an election: votes and funding. And there are a number of things that voters care passionately about and that they have no hope of ever getting from Republicans, but unfortunately for Democrats, they are the exact things big-ticket donors despise, which is why Democrats in very secure districts who tend to run unopposed are the ones most willing to talk about them. The left is, in fact, a very heterogeneous group with a mountain of conflicting interests and decades of infighting, so it's very hard to appeal to all of them and wealthy donors. Republicans don't have this problem, or at least they don't have it.
One thing I think it's really important to point out, though, because it's always talked about, like, oh, the Dems and their wealthy donors, they're wealthy donors. The Republicans operate on a level of funding and wealth from not just wealthy donors, but from corporate super PACs made specifically to ensure the election of politicians that brazenly and openly will advocate for these private corporations' best interests. I'm talking like massive amounts of money are flooded into the Republican Party, not just into the Republican Party. Usually it's in the form of self-made campaign ads against progressive politicians. Think about AIPAC. AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, of its own volition, took out, I think, close to $250 million and put it into making ads they ran against the Squad members. And I believe they successfully managed to oust 2 or 3 members of the Squad with those ads. AIPAC did. Because remember, as much as, you know, a lot of pro-Palestine activists will tell you Americans are screaming from the rooftops for funding to Israel to stop, AIPAC successfully yeeted several members of the Squad out of their sitting positions with their ads calling them anti-Semitic and outing their anti-Israel sentiment to their voters. Keep in mind, a lot of progressive voters even, or I should say Democrat voters even, are pro-Israel. And so, yeah, they are out half the Squad, so half the Squad lost their seats after AIPAC spent $300 million running ads to against them. And that's just one single Republican pro-Israel specific think tank and PAC. Like, the amount of money, not just from like wealthy donors, but corporate dark money institutions and think tanks and corporate super PACs that the Republicans have, it's insane. It's not even close to comparable to what the Democrats have going on. The Democrats have a few wealthy donors, don't get me wrong. Like, there are some rich people that vote Democrat, they vote to they donate to the Democrats. There are some company CEOs that want to come off as progressive, or maybe they have the personal progressive politics, they support a Democrat, right? Usually it's if they have like a company ran out of a state that's hard blue, they'll back the Dems because that's just the government of that state. It's not really a political thing. It's more of a, well, shit, man, we don't want to be on your bad side. We operate out of your state. It's more of that situation. But for the most part, the Democrats rely, like, to the point where, like, there's a lot of, from what I've heard, because I've talked to people who are like volunteers and stuff for the DNC, and they talk about how, like, during election season, it is like a mad scramble dash to raise money through donations for the Democratic Party. Every dollar counts. Every dollar helps. The Democratic Party is not overwhelmed with money for like campaign ads and paying volunteers and stuff. The Republican Party is working with magnitudes more. And meanwhile, you have people trying to equivocate what the Dems and the Republicans are working with in a political landscape that, whether you like it or not, money decides the winning party. And a lot of progressives in America are actively vying for the Democrats to, ironically, to give up their financial support in the form of any corporate or wealthy donations in order to keep to their principles, even though it would weaken their ability to win, which is what this video is criticizing. I'm not trying to, call out Innuendo Studios. It's just, it's frustrating when I see people equivocate the Republicans and Democrats taking donations. It's just not even close to the same.
But is bad. Despite many, in some ways, even more passionate and fundamental differences, conservatives value loyalty and in-group cohesion, and this keeps them coming together every 4 years in a surprisingly unified voting bloc. It also helps that they fucking hate us, and most would sooner vote for a Republican they despise than any kind of Democrat. And, lucky for them, the things conservative voters want are much more aligned with corporate interests. So, building a coalition on the left is a lot of work, and faced with this challenge...
Funnily enough, DeLancer, the best example of a Democrat courting, minority communities was Biden. Biden is the most popularly elected president in American history by the most votes. Biden pulled, by far, the most POC votes of anyone before. Like, Biden pulled more POC votes than Kamala Harris did as, like, an old white man. Like the oldest, like, you imagine old white man and you think Joe Biden. And that motherfucker pulled more POC votes than Kamala Harris did. I'm just saying. The numbers don't lie. Like leftists online can say, like, POC don't want to vote for a milquetoast Democrat like Joe Biden, but the voter numbers actually say quite the opposite of that claim. So, like, yeah, more Bidens if we want to, like, court, like, POC in particular as a party. More Biden-like policy. If we don't use Obama, is Tim Walz our only option? I think Obama runs against Trump for the third term, and I think it will be legendary. The earth will quake with the rumbling of their battle.
There is a liberal tendency to turn away from policy and focus instead on process. Generally uncontroversial things like bipartisanship, compromise, decorum. And fair enough, the absence of these things in Washington over the years is certainly something everyone left of center is sick of, but they're not things Democrats can make.
The problem is every motherfucker you hear say, I just hate politics in America these days. It's so partisan. It's like those people are always conservative. They always are. It's always like trying to... like anyone who tries to equivocate the Republicans and the Democrats, it's either someone purposefully trying to muddy the the surprisingly simplistic fact that the Republicans are evil, or they just don't know enough about politics to have to fully recognize the state of things right now. Like, no, things are not insanely partisan right now. The Republicans are trying to destroy what America stands for and get their guy in power forever, and they're now openly saying it. It's not even like a lie or a joke or a secret anymore. And if you're not in favor of that, you're supposedly partisan against Trump. It's like, no, anyone who tries to make that distinct or not make that distinction is being dishonest or stupid.
Happen all by themselves, and more to the point, none of them are results. They're means. Like, a willingness to compromise is not a position, and when you overfocus on how you should go about things and not what things you should go about, it fosters a certain philosophy about government that is both highly flawed and highly exploitable. The valuing of means at the expense of ends. Most people would say that the ends justify the means is a crap moral philosophy. Democrats would agree. But liberals often overcorrect to the point where thinking about the ends at all is thought of as, in a vague, reflexive kind of way, innately immoral. There's a very Enlightenment way of thinking that implies that, with the right means, the ends take care of themselves, and immoral behavior becomes functionally impossible. I want to stress that claiming political group A adheres to philosophy X is always reductive. Human beings hold many patterns of thought simultaneously and slip between them depending on context. This is less the key to understanding liberals and more one pattern of thinking liberals often slip into. But this idea of the perfect system that can only spit out justice is how liberals tend to think about democracy. We can call this values-neutral governance, and
I'm going to be honest, this is like a really good example, because once again, we're not just watching the alt-right playbook because it's perfect. It's got its flaws, because I don't agree with everything that like internet leftists tend to say. I notice this said about liberals a lot. I don't even know if I would consider myself a liberal, because like my views for what should happen to America might be considered quite radical by most liberals, you know? I think even like just no private health care, all free health care paid for by U.S. tax dollars. Like even among Democrats, that's not an extremely popular policy. Most people want a public option based on the polling that I've seen even of Democrats. And so like I see a lot of this like talking about how liberals are ineffectual and they are like they are so concerned about looking just, but I don't really think that's the case. Like this is such a 2018 internet politics view of things, because I think what the 2020 election told a lot of people, especially with those voting numbers, remember Biden got so many more votes than any other president has won on before, even Trump in this most recent one, is that a lot of Democrat voters are the types of people you will never hear from. You will never see them post on social media. You will never see them comment below a video. You will never see them out on the street protesting or putting up signs or wearing merch for their candidate. They're just normal people who are going to, if they feel motivated enough, vote for the Democrat during the election. And they don't think about politics more than that. They're just normal people. Most normal people in America are liberal leaning. They're like, the idea that liberals are this like, we liberals, we fight for liberal democracy because we love liberal democracy, and liberal democracy is what we love. Fundamentally, I see that, like, obviously America is a liberal democracy, and that is like, keeping that part of America going is a pretty high priority, especially with Trump trying to destroy our Constitution. But like, the idea that most liberals ever think about how much they love liberal democracy or democracy as a system is just not really true. Most Americans, and most liberal Americans especially, just kind of take it for granted and don't even think about it. It's just it's the norm. It's the default. It's what you exist in. It's what you grew up with. It's what you're used to. And so this weird, like, psychoanalyzing of liberals that I've noticed a lot of socialists and communists like to do, just leftists in general like to do, it's like, it sounds smart and super insightful when you hear it, but then when you really think about how it applies to, like, any amount of real-world politics, like, how it like interacts with the way that people actually vote, the way that people actually change their minds and decide who they're going to vote for, the actual election results we've gotten based on what candidate was running and on what policies and what their perception was. It's like, you know, the thesis of this video is that liberals are weak because they compromise too much, and Innuendo Studios was definitely one of the people saying Biden was a massive compromise figure on the part of the Democrats, and yet Biden was the biggest win the Democrats have ever gotten electorally. So if your argument is hardcore centered around the idea that liberals' desire for compromise and coming off as bipartisan and centrist and willing to compromise is a death knell for the Democratic Party, then why did the most demonized for being a centrist candidate ever pull the most significant victory ever for the Dems in any election, period? Liberals have realists, pragmatists. They are normally Democrats and progressives. Yeah, I wish we ran Biden instead of Hillary in 2016. Hard to say if Biden would have won in 2016. You know, you could. I think a lot of the support for Biden probably came from displeasure with Trump's running of things back during COVID. But keep in mind, Americans have a short memory. 4 years later, and they vote the same guy back into office.
You can see why it would appeal when you're trying to sum all the demands placed on a politician. Under this thinking, you don't need to engage with the needs and desires of your constituency, your donors, or even your opposition. Because if democracy is working, everyone deserving will get what they need as a matter of course. That's what democracy is for, to divine what is right out of a cacophony of different voices. It's
No
okay
one
for
thinks
people,
this.
even people with power.
Now, every liberal thinks and has thought, like, for years and decades, like, at least since Al Gore lost the election against, I think it was Bush, right? Ever since then, I think most liberals, and probably way before then, but at least since then, I think most liberals have been, democracy is of the people, by the people, for the people, but the people are retarded. That is basically 90% of liberals' opinion on democracy, at least since Gore lost.
To have bad ideas, because bad ideas will always be outnumbered by good ideas. Checks and balances. Hell, you can have bad ideas and it won't make any difference, provided you commit to...
This I actually like as a criticism of liberals. I think a lot of liberals did heavily lean on the idea that, like, okay, there's always going to be a proportion of the country that are crazy, anti-democratic, fascistic, anti-vax loonies, right? But most people make fun of types like that. Most people see someone as anti-vax and it immediately makes them go, oh, cringe. What I think a lot of liberals did not account for was the fact that Trump being publicly anti-vax would not be something that hurt his reputation. Him being anti-vax would instead start a trend of anti-vax politics becoming more popular. He set a trend. He became a trendsetter for anti-vax shit, rather than it being something that should have, and everyone, I think most liberals would have thought, would destroy him. If you told a liberal from 2016 Trump will be publicly anti-vax in 4 years, they'd say, oh, that destroys him, right? Because I think liberals have a lot of faith in the idea that the collective common sense of people will react appropriately when given the proper stimuli. Oh, Trump did something really stupid. People are finally going to get it now. People are finally going to realize how fucking insane he is now. And even I find myself falling into that trap where no, in reality, it actually leads to more people saying, oh, the president did that horrible thing? I guess that's good. I guess that's okay.
To obeying a just set of rules, only justice will ever be produced by them. And you can see how utterly paralyzing it can be when half the participants of that system refuse to play by those rules. Values-neutral governance is an engine that only runs by mutual consent. Now, the system is supposed to be self-repairing. If the rules are broken in a way that it doesn't have specific contingencies for, you can write those contingencies. But you'd have to pass them through Congress or the courts. As in, you'd need the cooperation of the people violating the rules. All that's left then is to fix the system without their approval. But that's going outside the rules. That's thinking about ends. And to you, the system is morality itself. You can't go outside it and still behave ethically. If the problem is people breaking the rules, you can't fix that by breaking them further. At this point, the Democratic senator usually throws up both hands and says, fuck it then, I'm going to do what the Republicans should be doing. I'm going to follow decorum and look for compromise. I will not be responsible for the degradation of our governmental system. Maybe everything still goes to shit, but nobody could claim that I didn't do my job. And once upon a time, I think they genuinely believed that this was leading by example. But I don't think today they're under any illusions that this will right the vessel, appeal to Republicans' better nature. But Democrats keep doing it, because on some level they genuinely believe that even when it accomplishes nothing, following the rules to the bitter end is the noble thing to do. The captain goes down with the ship. I'm using poetic understatement when I say...
I do think that a lot of this rings... I think here's where I'm going to cut the video. But I do want to give my final statement here. This video is probably the most disagreeable video from the Alt-Right Playbook series that I can remember, looking back on it. And yet it still makes a lot of very good points that I think are worth hearing. But I think a lot of the ideas about how the Dems are self-destructing by being too compromising or trying too hard to appeal to moderates rather than hardcore doubling, tripling down on a progressive voter base, I think a lot of those criticisms ring absurdly hollow when you consider that this video came out before Biden's 2020 win. And I know I repeat it a lot, but it's a very, very important detail that cannot be forgotten. Biden didn't just eke out a victory. He won by a lot, by the way, the biggest victory of any presidential win ever. The most people ever, by millions more than second place, voted for Biden over anyone else. Like, he brought out a level of voter participation never seen before in America. Voter participation, a number that is absurdly low in our country. One of the biggest problems in American politics is how few people vote. Biden increased Democrat voter participation in the amount of views that he got. Or not views that he got. His views, yeah, his video went viral. In the amount of votes that he got. Not views. I got YouTuber brain. Views equal votes. Or votes equal views in the YouTuber world. Bro was pulling numbers, okay? And so the idea that these same people spent years calling Biden the most milquetoast liberal. The most, like, Biden has been put forward as, like, the mascot of everything wrong with the Democratic Party by leftists online. And most notably because of the claim that people like him it wasn't out of Biden love. Dude, you can say that, but you're coping because the numbers don't lie. Biden pulled numbers never before seen. And then, of course, we replaced Biden with Kamala Harris, who now every leftist likes to pretend they hate. But for those, 3 months after Biden was ousted in favor of Kamala Harris, everyone was, yes, queen, we're not going back. Oh, my God, Charlie XCX. Oh, my God, Coconut Tree. Oh, my... everybody was yas queening for Kamala Harris, especially the leftists, mostly to spite Biden and to spite Biden bros, such as yours truly. And then Kamala Harris, who is supposed to represent a more progressive and oh yeah, she's a woman of color, she's younger, she's not an old white man, you know? She was supposed to represent a positive change in the metric of, I think, a lot of leftists for the Democratic Party. Even with people like Hassan calling her Cop Mala, what was it? They called Biden Genocide Joe, and they called Kamala Harris Holocaust Harris. That's what leftists called Harris nowadays. They call her Holocaust Harris. But before the election itself, everyone was talking about how this is great. Now we get to actually win the election. We were totally going to lose when it was Biden. And then Harris gets blown the fuck out. It's obviously we can't see alternate timelines, and we don't know for a fact what made who win. But when you look at those numbers, I just think this rhetoric about Democrats digging their own grave by being too compromising rings hollow. When you're coping, I'm the one coping now, according to BK7796ULG, no profile picture. I'm the one coping because they have to come up with an excuse for why Biden's massive vote numbers don't mean that people liked Biden. But me saying, I think it might be that Biden had a decent amount of support. I think maybe that's why he got the most votes ever. And it's no, you're coping, bro. You're coping. The numbers, they're coping for you. You made those numbers be what they are. That's part of your cope. It's okay, man. Anyway, I just think it rings hollow. when you try to say, like, Biden-style politics will kill the Democratic Party, when moving away from it, when doing Biden-style politics got the Dem Party its biggest win ever, and moving away from it brought about its most devastating loss, literally ever. And I think when you're the one who tries to say, no, that's not what's going on, you might be the one coping. You might be the one coping, I think. I think the fact that exactly what I said would happen, happened, and now I'm saying, look, it happened, now you're coping. Though, to be fair, I did think Kamala Harris would sweep. I did think Kamala Harris would still sweep, so I was wrong about that. TBH, the demo bashing is getting old, and part of the reason I left r/enlightened centrism, like demographic bashing, like particular political groups. Trust me, if you think I bash leftists too much, it's like a fraction of what I get from like hardcore leftists. Every video I upload, I get like comments from like ex-fans saying, I hate you now that you don't want to nuke Israel. It's like, I never wanted to nuke Israel. Why did you think I wanted to nuke Israel? What? Like I genuinely get comments who are like, I can't believe you think Israel should be allowed to exist. It's like, what? Like, I don't know if I think the country should be violently dismantled. No, I don't know if I agree with that. Yeah, you don't agree with it, you fucking genocidal monster. It's like, okay. Anyway. What a silly political state of affairs, huh? If you guys, however, enjoyed this segment, if you found it entertaining, educational, or enjoyable in any way whatsoever, then please consider leaving a thumbs up and a comment down below. Every single like boosts the channel and my streams and my VODs and my videos and the algorithm, getting them out into the recommendeds of new people who've never watched my stuff before. So if you guys want to support the channel, make sure you hit those buttons. And of course, if you want to see more from me in the future, be sure to follow my social medias linked down below, including especially my fan Discord. It's the main hub of my community and fan base on the internet. I host game events, call-in streams, watch parties, and movie nights there, as well as announcing all my new uploads and streams. So if you don't want to miss anything, that is the place to be. And of course, if you want to support me directly financially, help me keep the lights on and a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio, and you feel like it, then please consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub to someone else on my website, xanderhall.com/live. You can also support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or you can buy some custom Xander Hall merch, streamer merch, through the Streamlabs link down below in the description. But don't forget, make sure you send some support to the original video and series of videos, I should mention, by Innuendo Studios, which will of course be linked down below in the description as well at the very top. So go leave a like, go leave a comment and a view, and maybe even subscribe. You really should subscribe. I liked Innuendo Studios stuff, but even if I don't agree with everything he says, I like it. I like his stuff. It's good. It's solid. It's well made. And I highly recommend you send your support over. But I want to say thank you to everyone for the support you've sent me. And as always, I hope to see you again next time.